हाँ ठीक है.
तू इंट्रोड्यूस करेगा ना?
हाँ.
चलो.
Sorry. Start करें.
नहीं स्टार्ट.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our latest feature of IndiCast.
थोड़ा दूर करके ही बात कर सकते हो.
And today we are naturally talking about what everybody who talks about international relationships and the international economic systems is talking about today. We are talking about the tariffs imposition by the US. So let's begin with first introducing what tariffs are, and then we'll start discussing the policy implications of a move of this stature and nature. So, see, a tariff is basically a special tax that a country will add to basically the things that it buys from other countries. So it'll make foreign goods more expensive for the domestic country. So hypothetically, if you are talking from the perspective of the US, if China is manufacturing cheap goods, you will impose a tariff that will make impositions like from the Chinese goods more expensive. So if for example Chinese goods are flowing into the US, you can make them hypothetically a certain number of dollars more expensive. So you will naturally make it more difficult for the population within the US to buy Chinese goods. You will give them a competitive advantage. This is an overall very simplistic vision of what tariffs basically feel like. And now they have many impacts on the international economic systems. There's a lot of policy implications that tariff imposing countries cause. Now, basically, when two countries typically tariff each other's goods, because when one country tariffs one country's goods, that will not go unpunished. There will be a retaliatory action from the other country also. So they both suffer economic inefficiencies. The school of thought in international trade and economic policy and economic theory is that taxation and tariffs are usually something that we call as market distortions, that they basically call economic inefficiencies. So what they'll do is that they will raise prices for consumers both in the country outside and even in the imposing countries. Sometimes they will make inputs costlier even for the domestic industries. So hypothetically, if we need to import a good from China and if we impose a tariff on them, we will make it more expensive for our domestic producers to acquire a certain raw material that may be cheaper to buy from China. So this will now lead to retaliatory tariffs that will cause reducing the economic efficiency of both countries. Now the line of thought that Trump comes from is the one where he thinks that the competitive advantage of any other economy that they enjoy over the US government is cheating. So, any competitive advantage that China may have enjoyed or any other country may have enjoyed, for example, Bangladesh may have enjoyed in the textile sector, is cheating. So, now he wants to draw economic benefits out of them. See, your tariffs will not drive revenue until and unless you have a significant import burden in your country. So, the US does import quite a lot, and that's why tariffs imposition is ongoing, because that's the only likely outcome for it to have to drive revenue in the United States. So, there's a lot of short term nationalist gains that the Trump administration wants to draw from these tariff impositions. Whether it's good or bad, that's a policy implication that is for you and me to decide with deeper discussion. But I just thought I'll give you an overview of this issue, and now I will come to Jay.
Yeah, I mean, this is another classic example of Trump's populist measures. This is not the first time that he's doing this. A lot of people have said that tariff is his favorite word, and he usually does that against countries which have an edge over the United States of America, specifically with respect to trade, which he considers cheating. And given that he's an extremely ruthless and an extremely crude businessman, all of these practices would very well get reflected in the American economic behemoth. So he's not running America as a country, but he's running America as a
As an
as a business,
enterprise.
as an enterprise,
Yeah.
quite similar to that of what East India Company was a few years ago, a few hundred years ago. My bad. So yeah, I mean, intimidating other well-to-do trading entities into, like, blackballing them into, you know uh, st- uh, blackballing them into doing things according to what is expected out of them in the world stage. And from what I could understand was that from a globalization perspective, I think Trump's policies are taking like 5 6 step back so a step backwards in a direction of more, conservative policies where American interests are given more leeway as compared to the world interests. You would see the violent reactions that the European Union gave. I don't think European Union has ever reacted this aggressively against the American stance, where they're stating that 20% tariffs would actually affect the lives of millions of people, and it would actually push the American domination over European foreign policy and trade policy on the sidelines, and would force Europeans to have a more individualistic perspective into world politics and economy. I feel this has also caused a bit of a rift between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, where Elon Musk has said that there should be an open relationship between Europe and America, because I feel Elon Musk is a closeted white supremacist, and if you do not give Europeans the benefits that Americans are enjoying, his goal actually falls flat.
And this is, I think, in direct opposition to what JD Vance believes, because I think, in JD Vance's own words, or rather in Pete Hegseth's own words, based on the chat leak that happened last week, I think,
Yeah.
there is a great loathing for European freeloading by American conservatives, or rather this breed of American conservatives who are not necessarily in the same line of thought as the old guard of Republicans. Like, they're clearly different ideologically from the George Bush, the clubhouse Republicans, as you used to call them earlier. So, this is a new breed of Republicans that you are seeing. Many people in the Trump administration have a great loathing for Europeans. Many have a great loathing for, many American friends. So, like Trump is going after their adversaries, he's also, going after long standing American allies. Now, the Trumpian view on tariffs comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of trade and a fundamental misunderstanding of international economics. See, tariffs imposed by other countries are not necessarily other countries cheating on the United States. A trade deficit is not always a bad thing. A trade deficit almost most of the times indicates a high domestic consumption, which the US had, a strong currency, which the US had, which are both a sign of a healthy economy. So the US dollar, being a global currency and a sort of a reserve for a store of value across the world, was a direct function of these things, that the US is, after all, a reliable and a stable currency, which comes from a country which has a very predictable and a very stable economic outlook. I feel like those things are slightly being reversed in this administration. So, because capital has been flowing into the US up until now, that has always led to a stronger dollar, and imports as a result become cheaper. And that's happened even in the Democrat administrations. So, I feel like Trump is trying to solve a problem which will accrue political gains to his, domestic populist viewers, but it's not necessarily economically prudent. And in essence, I'll go back to one fact, that in macroeconomics, trade deficits don't necessarily mean foul play. And maybe Trump understands this, but he also understands politics better, and he knows that he has a domestic audience to serve, and he will never serve them these
A
facts.
lot of people are saying this is a way of Trump telling the Americans to buy from the domestic markets and not just bank on foreign imports. And but that is essentially affecting so many American companies, specifically the big seven companies of the United States, companies like Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Tesla, etc. These companies, most of their workforce, most of their capital, and most of their assemblage is actually outside the United States of America. And
Yeah.
if you start tariffing most of these countries, then it is in essentiality affecting the Americans the most,
Yeah,
in
for
my
sure.
opinion.
Yeah.
And I feel the biggest surprise for me was when Vietnam was tariffed by a rate of 46%. I just don't understand why. I think Raj would be in a better position to explain me that. But interestingly, Vietnam dominates the market for the assembly of iPads. So the most amount of iPads are actually assembled in Vietnam. And from that angle, Vietnam also has been doing pretty well on the manufacturing side and has been a fierce competitor. And I would say Vietnam right now, when it comes to, like, the rise in manufacturing, is like a very, very good story,
Yeah,
specifically
for
in the
sure.
last 15 years. So obviously it has raised a lot of
Yeah,
eyebrows. And
Vietnam and Mexico are the greatest beneficiaries in foreign policy, what we call the China plus one policy. So many countries have tried to diversify their global supply chains streams away from China, and the greatest beneficiaries of these policies have been countries like Vietnam and Mexico, because they have been able to take the competitive advantage away from China to a little extent. That is something that India tried to do. Because of a poor regulatory environment, we were not able to get the gains that countries like Vietnam and Mexico maybe were able to do. So we have to understand that Vietnam has had a very successful trade and industrial policy in itself. Now, I'll keep coming back to the same point, that competitive advantage and comparative advantage in manufacturing is not cheating. Every country works on lower labor costs. Every country tries to build some economies of scales in their manufacturing. That's what we tried to do with Make in India, but maybe we didn't do that great a job with. Every country will try to induce some manufacturing with government support, like subsidies and industrial policy, which is something that we are trying to do with maybe the production linked incentive schemes. But this may distort trade a little bit, but it's not really cheating in a moral sense. And that's what Trump always views as cheating. Now, whether this is right or wrong is a moral judgment for us to make, but a dollar to dollar tariff imposition, then retaliation for that, will always cause trade distortions. See, Chinese competitive advantage, hypothetically, are not that bad a thing for the US consumer also. If China makes goods for a very low price, that will translate into the Walmart, for example, selling very basic products in the US domestic market for reasonable prices. This will also keep, US tech firms outsourcing a lot of their services. And this will keep a lot of these firms, competitive internationally. So I feel like the tariffs are misunderstood. They often hurt the imposing country themselves, because if you start imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, the advantage that you get from low labor costs, economies of scale from a country like China will be lost, and you may not be in a position enough to replace their manufacturing capacity. So I feel like there needs to be more complexity in the advisory and the understanding of international trade and economic policy, which may be lacking in this present US administration. But I am not a pessimist, so let's see how it goes.
so, I mean, clearly, with respect to Trump administration's foreign policy, you're not a pessimist at all. My understanding is that, and a lot of economic experts are also predicting that this move may lead to a recession. What are your thoughts on that?
It can definitely induce a slowdown in the international economy. Whether or not it will lead to a technical recession is something that we need to sort of look at in the long term. See, it will definitely raise prices for American consumers. Higher prices may slow down the consumption in the American economy. A lot of the American companies may be operating around the world, so it may affect revenues for a lot of international organizations. This may cause even an impact to the net exports of the United States. It may affect net exports to India as well, because retaliatory tariffs after a point will affect the entire international economic system. When China and the US are in trade war, the spillover effects of that will affect the entire world. if net exports start declining, the aggregate demand of a lot of countries will start declining. So this can definitely lead to a slowdown. Now, Indian economy, they say, survived the 2008 2009 recession because India was gaining the benefits of the 1991 liberalization privatization reforms. 2003 to 2008 is the period where people say that the benefits of the LPG reform started accruing to the Indian economy. So when you take an economic measure today, when you take a policy action today, the benefits might accrue to you 10, 20 years from today. So, the problem is that India is already in a slowdown today. So, the fact that we were able to be a bright spot in 2008 might not be the case in today's day, because in 2016 we had a domestic cut down in our aggregate demand as an outcome of a policy measure known as demonetization, which was followed by implementation of GST, where a lot of people were not able to keep up with the regulatory environment. And then we had the pandemic, then we had a lot of international shocks, which has led to a sustained permanent output loss even in the Indian economy. So we are not in the best shape that we were maybe in 2008. So now maybe we might be seeing a lot more economic loss, a permanent economic loss, more job losses, and you couple that up with the losses in employment in artificial intelligence, then you are looking down the barrel to large scale unemployment and a regulatory and infrastructure environment that is not able to keep up with the job demand that we need.
Absolutely. You know
So
what? How a pessimist would view this current economic situation. A pessimist would view this current economic situation to what was going on during the time of the Great Depression and the Weimar Republic. Uh, what is your opinion about that?
listen, I'm not like an expert on history. I think that that is an extreme example. There is a lot of resilience in the Indian economic setup. We showed that in 1991. We showed that in 1997 again, when we were supposed to sort of uh, uh, let the American companies take an advantage of India's economic setup after our nuclear tests. So, one of the things about the Indian economy is that we don't reform without external pressure. So there have been many, many articles, by the way, in India saying thank you, Trumps, for the tariffs. So this might not be totally a bad thing for India also in some ways, because we have faced lesser tariffs to the US than, for example, Bangladesh has. So that might make our textile goods more competitive in the American economy as compared to Bangladeshi textile
Okay,
goods,
so
which is their advantage, by the way.
okay,
So, and this might also force Indian economic policy makers to reform and make our domestic policy environment more competitive and more friendly to external investors. So, maybe the tariff imposition by Trump is not totally a horrible thing for India, because this might force Indian policymakers to revisit a lot of the tariff and tax impositions, especially the ones and the barriers that foreign companies have to face in India. Having said that, whether the gains of these policies will accrue to the US is also something that
exactly,
needs to be studied in the long run.
exactly. So India has been put in the 26% tariff bracket. Uh, which all other countries in the Asian region have been put under similar stress? There is
I
Japan also, which said that it is regrettable that they were also put under some type of tariff bracket.
I haven't fully
Yeah,
gone
Japan was
through the
at
list. We
yeah,
can maybe pull it up on
yeah,
the internet, because I just started getting so deep into the policy implications for India.
yeah.
I stopped reading what the tariff impositions are for other countries.
India is 26%, right?
Yeah.
Japan is probably 20% if I'm not wrong. We will just check that.
No, I'm pulling it up. You don't worry.
Okay.
I'm pulling it up on Google. You just continue talking.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. I feel, yeah, 24%. Japan is 24%. And they're saying that it's going against the US Japan agreements. And yeah, I think these measures are very, very harsh to the long-time friends of the American Federation, and I feel a lot of people will again really reconsider their their long time loyalty towards Uncle Sam.
Yeah, for sure.
And what it does is that it forces people to look for other allies, other friends, and push people towards who would they consider their adversaries. Like, in a more they would look at them in a more friendlier manner. I feel I'm not saying that the Japanese would run to the Chinese. I would just say that Japan would also like reconsider a lot of things with the United
Yeah.
States.
That's for sure. See, there are issues with using tariffs as a political weapon. I feel like if you use it as an economic policy in a very targeted way and understand when you need to impose tariffs, you might even achieve something. But you can't exclusively use tariffs as a political tool, as a political weapon. Now, I have just been able to go to the bbc.com website and pull up the list.
Wow.
For the EU, it is 20%. For China, it is 34%, which is very high. For Japan, it's 24%. You were
Yeah.
close. For Vietnam, it's 46%. For South Korea, it's 26%. Taiwan is 32%. India is 27%. The UK is 10%. Switzerland is 32%. Thailand is 37%. Yada yada yada. We'll share the article, and I'm sure you've already gone through it. Many other countries which probably Trump doesn't see as a threat, like Australia, Argentina, Aruba are all at 10%, less than 10% in that list. Bhutan is at 10%. I don't know what
Bhutan.
the US had against Bhutan, but okay.
Probably the
Cambodia,
rice beer.
Cambodia, I feel, is one of the countries which is at a huge competitive advantage at the China plus one policy, and that is why it is at 49%. I think,
Yeah, okay, even higher than Vietnam.
yeah,
It's like
Bhutan is high, sorry,
it's like the American invasion of
Cambodia is
Indochina
higher
all over
than
again,
Vietnam.
bro. It's like that all over
Yeah.
again.
See, there are more issues that, if you need to raise government money from tariffs, you need to understand that for tariffs to work, you need to have high imports. So you are not disincentivizing imports, you're just imposing tariffs on foreign goods. So, it's a double whammy for your own domestic economy on that
A lot of
note.
people are saying that iPhones
Yeah.
will get expensive.
Yeah.
They'll get more expensive.
And we need to evaluate, does the presence of foreign goods becoming more expensive, does it necessarily need to benefits in the local economy? Because many times the local economy is working and operating on foreign inputs.
Absolutely.
So, and many businessmen understand this. That's why I feel like industrialists, no matter what they say in front of government officials, will not deep down support this policy measure. Now, if you have to use it as a political weapon, you are free to do so. But every time you induce a political weapon like a tariff imposition on another country, be very sure that they will impose a dollar for dollar tariff on your country. So you are losing your own competitive advantage in that market if you ever had one. So, I feel like it's not a very forward looking measure, and we are going to have a lot of trade distortions in the coming few months, quarters, and this may also lead to some permanent output loss in aggregate demand of many countries, maybe even our own. And we already know what it's been doing to the markets over the last few days. So
Yeah.
these are not very
It is
pleasant
said
times to
that
live in economically.
the biggest American companies they've lost around more than $2 trillion
Yeah.
in the stock market, and again, these are all figures which are like in the market, like they're not actually losing money. It's like it's the money that their stocks were like valued at.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, whatever I'm saying
Yeah.
is very, very basic. Everyone knows this,
No, but basics are the
again,
most important
yeah,
thing
but again,
sometimes. You need to get the
imagine,
basics right
yeah,
first.
imagine if your value was at say this much, and like say it was at 100, and suddenly it like it zeroes down to like 70 or something. That's a huge, huge loss.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, it would definitely hurt. And from what I could understand is that a lot of gains that Tesla also had made was basically on the valuation of Tesla in the stock market. Given that Elon Musk has been on this PR suicide mission with these tariff measures, Tesla has taken a lot of hits on its valuation in the stock market, and it could possibly signal the end of Elon Musk's domination at that front, which would, I feel, inadvertently be advantageous to China and companies like BYD.
That's true. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, even after claiming that Donald Trump was your best friend, you ended up shooting yourself in the foot. And the people who supported you the most, you isolated them, and now you've reached a point of absolutely no return.
I just want to end it with saying that the
Yeah.
post World War II free market international trade based economy was set up with some kind of rationale in mind. And my position will always be that those were not those were not people who didn't have their heads in, those were not people who were not smart. They were people who had their heads in the right space. They were working with some kind of economic rationale. And the post 1945 Bretton Woods international arrangement has its benefits, and it's time tested, and I feel like a return to that will be prudent. And if you disagree with me, I think international markets in the next few quarters will indicate why tariffs and tariff impositions and such heavy retaliations will be imprudent. So I feel like it would be better for the international trade and economic setup if these tariffs were withdrawn. If in a very ideal world we could go back to a sort of free market setup, or very low tariff kind of setup. And I feel like that would be better for the US consumer, for consumers internationally, and that would be good even for international trade. I would like to conclude with those
Yeah,
statements.
after Bretton Woods, you had the neoliberal reforms led by Ronald Reagan as well.
Yeah.
So there was another era in global economics where heavy tariff measures were taken,
Yeah.
and that basically led to the neoliberal reforms that we're experiencing right now. So a lot of people are saying that this new Trump-led tariff war would signal a third phase in the American-led global economic order, and I would
I mean,
like to conclude with that.
that's for all of us to wait and watch.
Yes,
Whether this will be an American-led world order is also
debatable.
dependent on how strong the coordinated responses
Hmm.
are from around the
Yeah.
world. Many countries like Japan and China, who are not conventionally best friends,
They're on the same
are
page right now.
coordinating on
Yeah.
how to counter US tariffs.
Yeah.
So, what the world order is going to be for the next few quarters or the next few years is very difficult to predict. If anybody says that they know where it's going, it's most likely that the person is taking a guess or they are lying.
Yeah.
So, whether it's going to be American led is for all of us to wait and watch. But
It could be the
yeah,
last American-led, I would say, last American-led steer to the ship,
yeah,
and after that, some other captain would come and take
yeah.
over the ship. Is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, man, like I don't even dispute the fact that the international order is US led.
Mhm.
I'm not particularly critical of the United States as a self proclaimed leader of the free world. It's all right that they want to assert that position, but there needs to be some assessment of prudent economic policy. I feel like somewhere along the line they lost prudent economic policy making. Trade deficits and tariff impositions as a political tool are doing nobody any good. They are especially not doing the United States any good. So this position needs to be revisited within the US policy making circles. And beyond that, the next policy implication is for everybody to guess. So I would like to conclude on that.
Yeah,
I'm done.
likewise.
Uh,
Thank you so much. Like, subscribe,
Please,
share.
if you
Thank you
found
so
if
much.
you found our conversation even slightly insightful, please share, please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for
Yeah, and
joining
Raj
us.
is the economics guy, so
I'm not very much the economics guy. I studied economics in college, and this is the first time since college that anybody cared about my economics degree. So,
सही है. चलो, bye guys. See you.
bye.
Bye.